Greetings folks. It will be along the lines of a guidance video for the younger people out there that are just entering the big bad world from the safety net of their parents' homes, school system, college, university, this sort of thing. My parents, there's some things that looking back I wish they would have told me and emphasized to me, and that's what I'm going to try and do now to you folks out there that are of that age, or perhaps to those of you who have kids and you want to pass on information that you think they need to know about. Anyway, where do I begin? Essentially, you want to leave school as soon as you are able to go into a blue collar trade or profession that you are good at. And if you aren't good at the blue collar trades and professions, then try and get good at one of them. Do not focus any effort on academia, and by academia I mean anything above college level, unless you really want to get a white collar job and compete with hordes of other people and end up in debt for the next 8 to 10 years of your life. Okay, that is really a dead end, and I am glad I didn't take it. And I know when I was at that age, I was meeting folks who had left university because they were in crippling debt. In one example, this guy, he'd gone and done a surveying course, ended up with an £8,500 debt on his shoulders, and this was like a few decades ago, by the way. It wasn't recently, so you can imagine how much that would be nowadays. And this was before tuition fees were getting hiked all over the place. So forget academia unless you know it's really your niche. So what to do with the whole blue collar trade thing? Well, there are certain jobs and activities in this world that, barring a major seismic shift or paradigm shift, are going to always get you work, near as damn it. And even in the event of a paradigm shift, you may still get work with these jobs. So what are they? Automotive, welding, a mechanical trade, a machinist trade, computer-aided design. I know this is actually like technically a white-collar job, although some would class it's not. It's or maybe a grey-collar job. So jobs along these lines. It's the sort of stuff that always needs work, you know. I mean, people say, you know, undertakers never go out of work. Yeah, right. You try getting work as an undertaker. Believe me, that is a niche flipping industry. When you get in, yeah, but trust me, niche industry, forget it. So when you get out there, you want to get into something along those blue-collar trades, as I mentioned. Another one is electrician, a carpenter, a builder. People are always building and pulling down homes, especially in Europe, at a massive rate of knots. The housing industry is always wanting to expand. And yes, I know the housing industry has its problems. It's building too many buildings and things like this and not preserving the green space, but it's a consideration. Also with the building trade, as a qualified builder, you can move into other jobs. You know, anything in the building trade can include not just being a chippy, a carpenter. It can include a roofer. It can include a plasterer, a joiner, all these different facets and all these different offshoots in the building industry. So that is something that young folks should consider. Do not go into computing. This is a mistake I made years ago. Everyone was on the computer bandwagon, you know, everyone wanted to get into information technology and all this nonsense, going to college. I tell you what a waste of time. Nowadays especially, you can learn all that using the internet. You can actually learn basic programming using the internet now. There's plenty now on the internet for would-be programmers out there. Yes, it may be a bit easier with a college course to do it. That's a consideration, but I wouldn't put much in it. I'd put most of your effort into getting good at a trade so you can get earning money. And that brings me on to the next point of the video. As a young kid out there, you will find money is tight. And now with the whole millennials, you'll be competing with the Generation X's, Generation Ys, and the millennials. And now especially more than ever, young people have got it harder than the previous generation, even my generation. which is Generation X, for people who want to try and work out how old I am, is really tough. So consider if you're a millennial coming in the world now, to do those things. When you're earning money, you want to save some money, and you want to buy property as soon as possible, preferably not in a city, or although that's the my inner survivalist that always says avoid cities. Work in the cities, earn the money in the cities if you have to, and use them to get out of Dodge when you can, to move to a lower population area to develop your skill set further and start working on the next stage of your life, which is like property, families, kids, this sort of thing, okay? So you want to start earning money. And if you can't earn big money, just try and earn enough to get by, so you can get into a position to earn enough to be comfortable. Yeah, I know some people say, oh, money, you shouldn't be focusing on money. Yeah, well, unfortunately, guys, the system that we're working in right now is heavily dominant on the greenbacks, so there is that to consider. So your finances need to be in order. Moving on to the next one, which is in relation to that. Avoid drugs, avoid scummy, degenerate, decadent, druggy type people, and avoid basically big time boozers and those that are basically going to drag you down. You don't need any of that BS. Yes, if you must, you move in those circles because you're in that peer group, but always try and be working on your exit strategy. I don't think you should become a total warrior monk, and you'll put yourself above the radar in that age group with all the peer groups for the most part out there for the young folks. But always work on your health and steering clear and on the straight and narrow as much as possible. You're no good in a jail or with a felony record under your belt, because that's just like the kiss of death in many ways, in a lot of ways for someone. In Europe, there seems to be a bit more of a tolerance for someone's got like a criminal record than if there is in the Americas. But I'd still say try and avoid the reprobates, the ne'er-do-wells, the chances, the wide boys, those types of folks as much as you can. Don't completely put it into every ounce of your being to avoid them paramount, but don't make any efforts to hang with him, if you know what I mean, guys. So that's those are just some guidance points for young folks that are out there. I'm trying to think of other things right off the top of my head, but I can't really formulate. It's the end of the day right now. I've been busy working today, so I just thought I'd throw that out there, and hopefully it'll ring a few bells and wake some kids up. I suppose I should move on to another thing about young kids. Actually, try and stay away from a lot of this the social media shite. It's mostly not worth your time. I mean, I use it for broadcasting and getting things put out there in regards to my thing that I do with videography and other sorts of things. But as far as like recreationally spending your time with your little PDAs and your smartphones, fiddling and diddling on it, really, guys, your efforts are better orientated into more productive things that you could be doing with yourself. For example, work a side job, or we'll go to the gym, or work on something that's going to benefit you. The thing about these games and everything is, and I'm a little bit guilty of this because I like playing video games to an extent, but I normally restrict that to on a desktop or a laptop, and it's normally in my downtime. With those little PDA smartphones that you can walk around anywhere and everywhere with, you can just whip them out and start playing the games. I think that's taking it too far. So try and regulate things away from the whole social media nonsense. What else is there? Hello, Puss. What are you up to? You've seen what I'm up to, eh? You want to try and avoid the bright lights in the big city as much as possible. Not for the fact that you should be scared of it. It's just the fact that typically those areas are overpopulated, they're overpriced, and they tend to have a grip on young people's hearts especially. I was no different when I was younger. The movies and TV makes it out to be some sexy, mysterious, dangerous and adventurous place, when in a fact, while it may be some of these things to some of the time, most of the time it's for a medium and long term strategy of living, it's a waste of time. It's a gilded, false, materialistic, energy sucking place that you really should only be looking at work related activities, and for your recreation, steer clear of it if possible. You want to be capable of working on your own vehicle, so learn at least basic mechanical skills. Get a vehicle that's second hand, don't buy brand new because it's a waste of money. One that has a reliable engine that lasts for many, many hundreds of thousands of miles. Yes, they are out there and you can find them. Notable makes are all American car makes. Generally, if you buy within a certain decade or a certain year frame, they will last a long time. And the chassis are so good on some of these vehicles, it's more cost effective to put a new engine in it. And Japanese vehicles can be considered because they do over engineer their engines typically, but they are the hardest engines to work on typically, and you normally pay a lot more in spare parts. So consider your vehicle carefully. Some people sometimes argue about whether it's a good thing to go into the armed forces these days. I'm no exception. I was in the military for 6.5 years, and back then, well, of course, I wasn't aware of what the real agenda is against Western civilization back then. I was under the impression that, we'd won the Cold War and, let the good times roll. Unfortunately, it's not quite like that. So to that end, I wouldn't advise a young person nowadays to enlist in the regular military. The regular military. Yes, do join a military organization for the experience and for the many benefits that you will gain from this. Your fitness, your mindset, your skill set, the people you'll meet, this sort of thing. It serves as a good crucible or forge, you might say, for the person who goes through it. So what do I mean by not the regular military? Well, join a territorial force, a territorial army. I would say do a short stint in a military organization, just so that you have the skills that will be useful to you. And some people get a little bit jellyfish about, mentioning military type activities. I don't. So to that end, and this is why, because if in the event of a bad thing starting in the world, you will be better served knowing how to defend yourself using weaponry than someone who doesn't know how to use weaponry. And also, more importantly, if you're in a country like Europe where most of the firearms are restricted, if you have military training, at least you'll know how to use a weapon you find in if a bad end of the world as we know it situation transpires. So this is another reason to do it. Now, for those that don't want to join the military but do want to learn firearms, then I advise you pursue the legal means of doing so. And most countries in the world will allow you to at least use firearms under a licensed, regulated basis. So, as what I spoke about the military angle, go along with civilian angle for this. This is something you can do. And as a side effect of that, it also means the guns are less likely to be restricted further the more people use the firearms, because they're less likely to want to hurt their voting base when they try and pass through more strict gun laws. As far as activism goes, I'd say I would advise not to be too vocal about your activism. I'd say be a bit more low-key about it. But anyway, that's just my video on guidelines for young people in the pro-white scene. I don't, and that's another thing about the word. What word would you describe to describe yourself as pro-Western or pro-Western civilization, pro-nationalist, somebody who understands what the ethos of a people is to work to, how do you get that into one word without making 10 different sentences? But that's all for now. Europa Infinitus.